The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Corisande Ashby stood at the window of her small cottage, watching the lane turn to rivers of mud, wondering if the roof would hold through another night. The thatch was old. Everything about this place was old, worn, held together by stubbornness and prayer. She was about to turn away when she saw them. 2 small figures stumbling up the path. Children. Soaked through, clinging to each other, the smaller one barely able to walk. Corisande was out the door before she could think, rain lashing her face, her shawl instantly drenched. She reached them in seconds, dropping to her knees in the mud. The older child, a girl of perhaps 9, with matted dark hair and enormous gray eyes, stepped in front of the smaller one. A boy. 5 years old, she guessed from his size. His lips were blue, his eyes were closed. "Do not touch him," the girl said. Her voice was hoarse, fierce. "We do not know you. I am not going to hurt you." Corisande kept her voice soft, steady. "But if you do not come inside right now, he is going to die. Do you understand? The cold will kill him." The girl's face twisted. Calculation warred with desperation. She looked down at the boy, at the way his small body trembled, at the grayish pallor of his skin. "Swear it," she said. "Swear you will not give us to anyone." "I swear. Now come. Please." She carried the boy inside. He weighed almost nothing, a bundle of wet cloth and fragile bones. The girl followed, watching Corisande's every move with the wariness of a feral cat. For the next 3 hours, Corisande worked. She stripped them both, wrapped them in every blanket she owned, fed the fire until the cottage blazed with heat. The girl ate the broth she offered in small, suspicious sips. The boy could not eat at all. She held him against her chest, willing warmth back into his tiny body, singing softly the way she had once sung to another child, a lifetime ago before everything fell apart. Sometime near midnight, his shivering stopped. His breathing steadied. The blue faded from his lips, replaced by something closer to living pink. "He will survive," Corisande whispered. The girl let out a sound that was not quite a sob. She curled against Corisande's side, finally allowing herself to be held. "What is your name, little one?" "Tanith." The girl's voice was muffled against Corisande's arm. "He is Emmerich. We ran away." "From where?" "Bad people." Tanith's grip tightened. "They were going to hurt him. They said they were taking him home, but they lied. I heard them talking. They said he had to disappear." Corisande's blood went cold. "Who is he, Tanith? Who is Emmerich?" But the girl was already asleep, exhaustion finally claiming her. Corisande sat in the firelight, holding 2 children she did not know, and wondered what she had just brought into her life. She did not have to wonder long. 4 days later, the Duke arrived. Corisande was in the garden, hanging washing that would never dry in this weather, when she heard the hoofbeats. Heavy, fast, expensive. She turned to see a black carriage thundering up the lane, drawn by 4 matched horses that probably cost more than everything she owned combined. The carriage stopped. A man emerged. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Tall and dark-haired, with a face that might have been handsome if it were not so severe. He wore a greatcoat that probably cost a small fortune, and his boots were spattered with mud, which meant he had been riding hard, changing horses, pushing through weather that would have stopped a sensible man. His eyes found hers. They were the color of winter ice, pale blue shot through with gray, and absolutely merciless. "You are Corisande Ashby," he said. It was not a question. "I am, and you are trespassing on my property." Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps. He was not accustomed to being challenged. "I am Theron Vantris, Duke of Ashworth. I have reason to believe you are harboring 2 children, a boy and a girl. They were seen entering this village 5 days ago." Corisande's pulse quickened. but she kept her face neutral. "A lot of children pass through this village, Your Grace. It is on the main road. Do not play games with me, Mrs. Ashby. The boy is my nephew. He was taken from my estate 4 months ago. I have been searching for him ever since, and I have very reliable information that he is here, in your cottage, right now." She should have been frightened. This man could destroy her with a word. He could have her arrested, evicted, ruined. But she thought of Tanith's fierce gray eyes. They said he had to disappear. She thought of Emmerich, finally laughing again after 3 days of silence, helping her feed the chickens that morning. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said calmly. His face went rigid. "You are lying. And you are still trespassing. Good day, Your Grace." She turned back to her washing. Her hands were shaking, but she would die before she let him see it. She heard him move, felt him close the distance between them until he was standing directly behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him even through the cold air. "I am going to search your cottage," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You can let me do it peacefully, or I can return with the magistrate and a dozen men. Either way, I will find my nephew. The only question is how much trouble you want to bring upon yourself." Coruscant turned. He was closer than she had realized, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Your nephew," she said slowly, "or the child you claim is your nephew. Because a man who truly cared about a traumatized little boy would not arrive like a storm demanding answers. He would arrive quietly, gently. He would understand that a child who has been through something terrible might need time to feel safe." A muscle flexed in his cheek. "You dare lecture me on how to care for my own family? I dare because someone has to." She did not look away. "Those children are terrified, Your Grace. Terrified of something, someone. And until I understand what they are running from, I am not handing them over to anyone, not even a duke." They stared at each other. The rain began again, soft at first, then harder, soaking them both. Neither moved. "You have no legal right to keep them from me," he said finally. "Perhaps not. But I have a moral one. Prove to me you mean them no harm. Prove to me you are who you say you are. And maybe, I will let you see them." Something shifted behind his gaze. The ice cracked, just for a moment, and underneath she glimpsed something raw, desperate, anguished. "He is all I have left," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "My brother is dead. His wife is dead. Emmerich is the last of my family. I have spent 4 months searching for him. I have not slept. I have barely eaten. And you are telling me he is here, alive, and I cannot see him." Her throat tightened. She had not expected the pain in his voice, had not expected him to be anything other than cold and imperious. "Tomorrow," she said, surprising herself. "Come back tomorrow. I will speak with the children. If Emmerich wants to see you, I will allow it. But you will not force them. You will not frighten them. And you will answer my questions about how a child was taken from a duke's estate in the first place." His eyes narrowed. "You are making demands of me? I am protecting 2 children who have no one else. If that offends you, I do not particularly care." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Tomorrow," he said, "at noon. I will be here." He turned, walked back to his carriage, and was gone. Coruscant stood in the rain, trembling, and wondered what she had just set in motion. Inside the cottage, Tanith was waiting. Her face was pale, her eyes huge. "That was him," she whispered. "The Duke. Emmerich's uncle. You were watching?" "I always watch." Tanith's hands twisted together. "He cannot take Emmerich. He cannot." "Why not?" Coruscant knelt before the girl. "He says he has been searching for months. He says Emmerich is his family." Tanith shook her head violently. "The men who took Emmerich, they worked for someone. Someone rich, someone powerful. They said when the boy is gone, the cousin becomes heir." And then they laughed. A chill spread through Corasanda's chest, settling deep in her bones. "The cousin," she repeated slowly. "Which cousin? I do not know his name, but he came to see them once, at the place where they kept us. He wore fine clothes. He had a gold ring with a snake on it, and he looked at Emmerich like he was already dead." Corisande sat back on her heels, mind racing. If Tanith was telling the truth, then the person who had arranged Emmerich's kidnapping was not some outside enemy. It was someone inside the Duke's own family, someone who stood to inherit if a 5-year-old boy disappeared forever. She looked at Tanith, at the fierce protective fire in those young eyes, and made a decision. "You are safe here," she said firmly. "Both of you. I will not let anyone take Emmerich, not the Duke, not his cousin, no one. How can you stop them? You are just one woman." Corisande smiled grimly. "One woman is often more dangerous than an army, little one. Now help me think. We have until tomorrow at noon to figure out what we are going to do." That night, after the children were asleep, Corisande sat by the fire and considered her situation. She was a widow of 26 years. Her husband Thomas had been a merchant's son, respectable but not wealthy. When he died of fever 3 years ago, his debts had consumed everything. She had been left with nothing but this cottage, inherited from a great aunt, and her own determination to survive. She had no family, no connections, no power. And she was about to challenge a duke. Madness. It was pure madness. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Emmerich's face that first night, blue-lipped and barely breathing. She saw Tanith stepping in front of him, a child warrior protecting her charge. She heard those words again, chilling in their simplicity. They said when the boy is gone, the cousin becomes heir. Someone wanted this child dead. Someone with money, with access, with a gold ring bearing a snake. And until Corisande knew who that someone was, she could not trust anyone. Not even a duke who claimed to be searching for his nephew. Especially not a duke who had failed to protect the boy in the first place. She would keep them safe, whatever it took, whoever she had to fight. Tomorrow, the Duke of Ashworth would return, and Corisande would be ready for him. What she was not ready for was how the morning would change everything. Emmerich woke screaming. Corisande was at his bedside in seconds, gathering his thrashing body against her chest, murmuring softly as he sobbed. He was still half asleep, trapped in some nightmare she could not see, but could feel in the violence of his shaking. "They are coming," he gasped. "They are coming to take me back. No one is taking you anywhere." She stroked his hair, damp with sweat. "You are safe. I promise you are safe." The man with the snake ring. His voice dropped to a whisper. He said I was going to have an accident. He said everyone would be sad, but accidents happen to little boys all the time. He smiled when he said it. Corisande's chest constricted so hard she thought her ribs might crack. "Do you know his name, sweetheart? The man with the ring?" Emmerich nodded slowly. "Uncle Aldous. He's my other uncle, father's cousin. He used to bring me sweets before." "Before what? Before he started looking at me like he hated me." Corisande held him tighter, mind racing. Aldous. She had a name now, a name she could use. The Duke of Ashworth had a cousin named Aldous, a cousin who apparently stood to inherit if a 5-year-old boy met with an unfortunate accident. She needed to tell the Duke, needed to warn him that the enemy was inside his own house. But could she trust him? What if he already knew? What if he was somehow complicit, willing to let his nephew vanish so long as the family name remained untarnished by scandal? No, She remembered his eyes yesterday, the raw anguish beneath the ice. He is all I have left. That had not been performance. That had been a man breaking apart. She would tell him, but carefully. And she would watch his reaction very, very closely. The Duke arrived at noon precisely. This time, he came alone, on horseback, his fine clothes exchanged for something simpler, more practical. He looked like he had not slept. Corisande met him at the gate. "Before you enter," she said in a low voice, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without reacting, because the children are watching from the window, and they are terrified." He stiffened, but nodded. "Speak." "Emmerich told me who arranged his kidnapping. He told me about a man with a gold ring, a snake design, a man who talked about accidents happening to little boys." The Duke's face drained of color, his hands clenched at his sides. He said the man's name is Aldous. For a moment, she thought he might collapse. He swayed slightly, catching himself on the gate post, his breathing ragged. "Aldous," he repeated. His voice was barely audible. "My cousin Aldous. You did not know." It was not a question, but he answered anyway. I trusted him. His expression hardened into something painful. I trusted him completely. When Emmerich was taken, Aldous helped me search. He offered money, resources. He told me not to lose hope. And all the while, he was the one who arranged it. The Duke looked up, and his eyes were no longer ice. They were fire. "I am going to destroy him," he said, his voice cold and precise. "I am going to ruin everything he has ever touched. And then, I am going to watch him hang." Corisande studied his face. The rage was real. The betrayal was real. Whatever suspicions she had harbored about his involvement, they dissolved in the face of this genuine shock. "First," she said carefully, "you need to meet your nephew. He needs to see that you are not the enemy, that you came to save him, not to hurt him." He closed his eyes, took a breath. When he opened them again, the fire was banked, controlled. How do I prove that to a child who has been taught to fear everyone? You start by being gentle, by letting him come to you instead of demanding he accept you, by showing him, through actions, that you can be trusted. I do not know how to be gentle. The admission seemed to cost him something. I have spent my whole life being hard. It was what my father demanded, what the title demanded. I do not know any other way. Corisande felt something shift in her chest, an unexpected softening toward this severe, complicated man. "Then you learn," she said simply. "For Emmerich's sake, you learn." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Teach me." It was the last thing she expected him to say, and it changed everything. The days that followed were strange and difficult, and unexpectedly tender. Theron returned each morning, arriving precisely at 10, staying until evening. He did not bring servants or guards. He came alone, dressed simply, as if he understood that wealth and power would only frighten the children more. At first, Emmerich would not look at him. The boy hid behind Corisande's skirts whenever the Duke entered, peeking out with those enormous gray eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. Tanith positioned herself as a barrier, arms crossed, chin raised, daring the Duke to try anything. Theron did not try anything. He simply sat, waited, let them grow accustomed to his presence the way wild creatures grow accustomed to a still pond. On the second day, he brought a wooden horse, carved with exquisite detail. He set it on the floor without comment, and continued reading the book Corisande had lent him, a battered volume of poetry she had owned since girlhood. Emmerich stared at the horse for an hour before finally creeping forward to touch it. Theron did not look up, did not acknowledge the moment. But Corisande saw his hands grip the book more firmly, saw the careful control it took for him not to reach for his nephew. On the third day, Emmerich asked the Duke a question. "Did you carve the horse yourself?" Theron looked up slowly, as if sudden movements might startle the boy away. "I did. When I was not much older than you. My father thought it was a waste of time. He wanted me practicing sword work, not whittling toys. Do you still carve things? Sometimes. When I cannot sleep." Emmerich considered this. "I cannot sleep either. The bad dreams come." "I know about bad dreams." Theron's voice was careful, measured. "They visit me, too." "What do you do when they come?" "I walk. I carve. Sometimes I read poetry, though I do not understand most of it." A tiny smile flickered across Emmerich's face. "That is silly. Why read something you do not understand?" "Because the words are beautiful even when the meaning escapes me. And because it reminds me that there are things in this world beyond power and duty and darkness." Corisande watched from the doorway, something warm and painful blooming in her chest. This man, this severe and guarded Duke, was trying so hard, stripping away his armor piece by piece, making himself vulnerable before a child who had every reason to reject him. It was working. Slowly, painfully, it was working. By the 5th day, Emmerich was sitting beside his uncle, watching him carve a new figure from a block of oak. By the 7th, he was leaning against Theron's arm, asking questions about the estate, about the horses, about whether there were dogs. "There are 3 dogs," Theron said. "Very large, very foolish. They will love you immediately." "I have never had a dog." Emmerich's voice was wistful. "Mother said they were too much trouble. Your mother was a practical woman." Theron's hand stilled on the carving. "She would have wanted you to have whatever made you happy, though. She loved you more than anything in this world. Do you miss her?" "Every day." Corisande turned away, blinking hard against the heat prickling behind her eyelids. She busied herself with unnecessary tasks, unwilling to intrude on this fragile, precious moment. But she could not avoid Theron forever. That evening, after the children were asleep, he found her in the garden. She was checking the vegetable beds, though there was nothing to check, just needing air, and needing distance from the confusing feelings that had been building all week. "You are avoiding me," he said. "I am giving you privacy with your nephew." "You are avoiding me," he repeated. "Why?" She straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "Because you are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A tyrant, a cold aristocrat who saw children as possessions rather than people." She met his gaze. "I was prepared to hate you. And now? Now I don't know what to feel." He moved closer. The moonlight caught his features, softening the severity, revealing something almost vulnerable beneath. "I could say the same about you," he said, his tone dropping low. "I expected an obstacle, a country widow interfering in matters beyond her understanding. I was prepared to remove you by whatever means necessary." Her stomach tightened. "And now?" "Now I find myself looking for excuses to stay longer each day. Now I think about your voice when I am trying to sleep. Now—" He stopped, his teeth clenching visibly. "This is inappropriate." "Yes," she agreed. "It is." Neither of them moved away. "I should return to the inn," he said. "You should." His hand came up, almost touching her cheek, then falling back to his side. "I will see you tomorrow, Mrs. Ashby." "Corisande." The word escaped before she could stop it. "If we are going to be inappropriate, you might as well use my name." A shadow passed over his features, something hungry and restrained. "Corisande," he repeated softly, as if tasting it. "Then good night, Corisande." He left. She stood in the moonlit garden for a long time, pressing her hand against her racing pulse, telling herself this was madness. It did not feel like madness. It felt like waking up. The 8th day brought complications. Theron arrived later than usual, his expression tight with controlled fury. "Someone told Aldous I have been making inquiries," he said without preamble. "He knows I suspect him." Corasanda's stomach dropped. "What does that mean for us?" "It means he will move quickly now. Try to eliminate the evidence before I can prove anything." He looked at her, at the cottage, at the windows where the children's faces had appeared. "It means you are all in danger. Then take Emmerich. Take him back to your estate where he will be protected. My estate is where Aldous has his strongest connections. Half my staff could be in his pocket. I cannot guarantee safety there." "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest I stay here." He held up a hand as she began to protest. "I will sleep in the barn. I will be invisible during the day. But I need to be close enough to protect them if Aldous makes a move. You cannot sleep in my barn. Do you know what people will say? I do not care what people say. I care about keeping my nephew alive." She wanted to argue, wanted to point out the 100 ways this could ruin her reputation, destroy the careful respectability she had built from nothing after Thomas died. But she looked at his face, at the fear he was barely controlling, and knew she could not refuse. "Fine. The barn. But if anyone asks, you are a distant cousin visiting from the north, whatever you say." His relief was visible in the loosening of his shoulders. "Thank you, Corisanda. Do not thank me yet. We have not survived this." He paused at the door. "If anything happens to me, if Aldous succeeds in whatever he is planning, there is a woman in the village of Thornwick, 15 miles north. Her name is Mrs. Pemberton. She has served my family for 30 years and is completely loyal. Take the children to her. She will know what to do." Corisanda felt a chill run down her spine. "You think it might come to that?" "I think Aldous is desperate, and desperate men do terrible things." His eyes met hers. "Promise me, if anything happens, you will take them to Thornwick, to Mrs. Pemberton." "I promise." He spent the rest of the day fortifying the cottage, checking locks, identifying escape routes, teaching Tanith what to do if strangers approached. The girl absorbed everything with fierce concentration, her protector instincts fully engaged. Corisanda watched him work and felt the walls around her heart crack a little more. That night, she brought him blankets in the barn. He had made a nest of sorts in the hayloft, surprisingly comfortable for a man accustomed to ducal luxury. "You did not have to bring these yourself," he said. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you need." He looked at her in the lantern light, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "What I need," he said, his voice rough and low, "is more complicated than blankets. Theron, tell me to stop." He moved closer, slowly, giving her time to retreat. "Tell me this is impossible, that you feel nothing, that I am imagining the way you look at me when you think I am not watching." She should tell him, should say all of those things and more. "I cannot," she whispered instead, "because I would be lying." His hand came up, cupping her cheek. His touch was warm, calloused from years of riding and carving, gentle in a way that contradicted everything about his harsh exterior. "I have known you for 8 days," he said. 8 days. It is not enough time to feel what I feel. What do you feel?" Terrified. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Hopeful. Confused. Certain. Those are contradictions. You make me a contradiction. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "I spent 32 years building walls, perfecting control, becoming exactly what my father demanded. And then I walked up your muddy lane and saw a woman who dared to tell a duke he was trespassing, and every wall I had crumbled." She closed her eyes. "This is too fast. I know. We barely know each other." "I know. There are 100 reasons this cannot work. Tell me one that matters." She opened her mouth to answer, But nothing came. Because in this moment, with his hand on her face and his breath warm against her skin, she could not think of a single reason that mattered more than this feeling. He kissed her. It was soft at first, questioning. But when she responded, when her hands came up to grip his coat and pull him closer, something broke loose. He kissed her like a man who had been starving, and she kissed him back with equal desperation, equal hunger. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were wild. "Tell me to stop," he said again. "Please. Because if you do not, I am not sure I can." She should stop, should be sensible, practical, and careful. All the things she had trained herself to be since Thomas died. Instead, she pulled him down for another kiss. They fell into each other in the lamplight, hands searching and breath mingling. He laid her down in the hay with a tenderness that made her ache, and she pulled him closer with a need she had forgotten she possessed. They moved together like two people who had been waiting their whole lives for this moment, without knowing it. Every touch was a revelation. Every whisper was a promise. And when they finally lay tangled together, hearts pounding, she knew that nothing would ever be the same. She traced the line of his jaw, marveling at how different he looked in the aftermath, softer, younger, almost peaceful. "I did not expect this," she admitted. "Any of this. Neither did I." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I came here looking for my nephew. I found something I did not know I was missing." "What is that?" "A reason to want more than duty." He pulled her closer. A reason to believe there might be more to life than obligation and control. They did not stop. They did not want to. The morning brought consequences. Coruscant woke in the hayloft, wrapped in blankets and Theron's arms, with sunlight streaming through the cracks in the barn walls and the sound of children's voices drifting from the cottage. Oh no. She sat up abruptly, dislodging him. "The children. They will wonder where I am." Theron was already pulling on his shirt, his movements efficient despite the lingering softness in his eyes. "Go. I will follow in a few minutes. We cannot be seen leaving together." She dressed quickly, fingers fumbling with buttons, mind racing through explanations and excuses. When she reached the cottage door, Tanith was standing there with her arms crossed. "You were not in your bed," the girl said flatly. "I was checking on the animals. Early morning." Tanith's gaze moved past her to the barn, where Theron had just appeared in the doorway, shirt untucked and hair disheveled. "Checking on the animals," she repeated slowly. "I see." Coruscant felt heat climb her cheeks. "Tanith, it is not what you think. I think it is exactly what I think." But Tanith's expression softened slightly. "I am not angry. He looks at you like you matter. Most men do not look at women like that. How would you know what most men look like? I have seen things." The girl's voice was suddenly much older than her years, in the places they kept us before. "I have seen how men look at women they want to use versus women they want to keep. He wants to keep you." Coruscant did not know what to say. Her throat was tight with emotions she could not name. "Is it true?" Tanith asked, her voice dropping. "Are we safe with him?" "Really safe?" "I believe so." "Yes." "Then I'm glad you were checking on the animals." The ghost of a smile crossed Tanith's face. "Emmerich will be happy to have both of you stay." The morning settled into something resembling normalcy. Breakfast was eaten, chores completed, lessons resumed. Coruscant had been teaching both children their letters, using a slate and chalk she had salvaged from the village school. But the peace was shattered just before noon. A carriage appeared on the lane, black, polished, drawn by two horses with silver fittings on their harnesses. It stopped directly in front of the cottage. Theron moved immediately, positioning himself between the door and the children. "Take them upstairs," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Lock the door. Do not come down until I tell you." "Who is it?" "I do not know, but I intend to find out." Corisanda herded the children up the narrow stairs, her heart lurching painfully. Emmerich was trembling. Tanith had grabbed a kitchen knife somewhere, holding it with practiced ease. "Stay here," Corisanda said. "No matter what you hear." She crept back down, staying hidden in the shadows of the stairwell, needing to see, needing to know. The cottage door opened. A man stepped inside. He was perhaps 40, well dressed in the manner of someone who cared deeply about appearances. His hair was graying at the temples, his features handsome in a polished, practiced way. On his left hand, he wore a gold ring, a ring with a snake design. Aldous. Theron's voice was ice. "How did you find this place?" The man smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Did you truly think you could hide from me, cousin? I have eyes everywhere. I knew about the widow and the children within a day of your arrival. Then why wait until now to appear? Because I wanted to see how far you would go." Aldous moved further into the cottage, looking around with distaste. A country hovel, a woman of no consequence. And you, the great Duke of Ashworth, playing house like a common farmer. Father would be disgusted. Our fathers are dead, and you are going to join them very soon if you do not leave. Threats? Aldous laughed softly. You forget, Theron, I know you. You are all honor and duty and rigid self-control. You will not kill me without proof, without a trial, without doing everything properly. It is your greatest weakness. What do you want? What I have always wanted. Everything you have. The title, the estates, the power. And the only thing standing in my way is a 5-year-old boy who should have died months ago. Corisanda's skin prickled with horror. She saw Theron's hands clench at his sides. He is your blood, Theron said, his voice dangerously soft. Your family? He is an obstacle. Aldous shrugged. Nothing personal. I actually quite like the boy. But accidents happen. Children are so fragile. You will never touch him. Will I not? Aldous smiled again. I have men outside, Theron. 12 of them, well armed. You have what? A carving knife? Perhaps that charming widow has a soup ladle. This ends today, one way or another. Then end it. Theron's voice dropped to something deadly. Right here. Right now. Just you and me. No men. No weapons. If you think you deserve what I have, prove it. Aldous hesitated. For all his confidence, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear, perhaps. Doubt. I am not a fool, he said finally. I did not come here to duel you. I came to make an offer. I do not want your offers. Hear me out. Give me the boy. Let me take him quietly, and I will make it quick. Painless. He will simply fall asleep and never wake up. You can tell the world he died of illness. There will be no scandal. No investigation. You can mourn appropriately, and then name me your heir, since you show no signs of producing children of your own. Everyone wins. Everyone except a 5-year-old boy who deserves to live. He's going to die regardless. Aldous spread his hands. The only question is whether it happens cleanly, with your cooperation, or messily, with your widow friend, caught in the crossfire. Think carefully, cousin. You have until tomorrow to decide. He turned to leave, and found Corisande blocking the doorway. She did not know where the courage came from, did not know what she thought she was doing. This small widow against a man who commanded armed men and had apparently ordered the death of a child without blinking. But she stood there anyway. Move, Aldous said coldly. This does not concern you. It concerns me because those children are under my protection. Corisanda kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. "It concerns me because you walked into my home and threatened to murder a little boy while I listened. And it concerns me because I am going to make sure every magistrate, every lord, every newspaper in this country knows exactly what you confessed to here today." Aldous went very still. "You heard nothing? I heard everything. And I am not the only one." She glanced up the stairs, where Tanith had appeared, the kitchen knife still in her hand. "The girl has been with Emmerich since the kidnapping. She knows every detail, every name, every face. She will testify against you. She is a child. Her word means nothing. Her word means everything when combined with what the Duke heard today. And what I heard. And what the men you hired will say when they are faced with the choice between hanging and giving evidence against you." Something cracked in Aldous' composure. The confidence faltered. "You are bluffing." "Am I?" Corisand stepped closer, emboldened by his uncertainty. "You came here thinking you held all the power, but you just confessed to conspiracy and attempted murder in front of 3 witnesses, one of whom is a Duke of the realm. How exactly do you think this ends for you?" Aldous looked between her and Theron. His jaw worked. "This is not over," he said finally. "It is," Theron said, his voice flat and final. "Tomorrow, I am going to the magistrate. I am going to present evidence, and I am going to watch them drag you away in chains. You have until then to run. I suggest you use the time wisely." For a moment, Corisand thought Aldous might attack, his face contorted with rage, his hand moving toward his coat. But then something in Theron's expression stopped him. Something that promised violence far beyond what Aldous was prepared to face. He left. The carriage rattled away. The armed men followed. Corisand's knees gave out. She sagged against the doorframe, suddenly unable to breathe. Theron caught her before she hit the floor. "You incredible, foolish, magnificent woman," he breathed against her hair. "You could have been killed. So could you. I am accustomed to danger. You are a widow with a vegetable garden?" She laughed despite everything, a shaky, half-hysterical sound. "I am a widow who just faced down a murderer. I think I have earned the right to be more than a vegetable garden." He pulled back to look at her face. His eyes were dark with something fierce and tender all at once. "You have earned the right to be anything you want," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And if you will let me, I would very much like to be part of whatever that is." She should think about it, should be sensible, cautious. Instead, she kissed him. Upstairs, Emmerich and Tanith watched from the window. Tanith was still holding the knife. Emmerich was clutching the wooden horse his uncle had carved. "Are the bad men gone?" Emmerich whispered. "For now." Tanith looked down at the 2 adults embracing in the doorway. "But I think we are going to be all right. Because of Uncle Theron. Because of all of us." Tanith finally set down the knife. "Because we found people who fight for each other. That is what family is supposed to be." Emmerich leaned against her, small hand finding hers. "I am glad you found me," she said, her voice so soft it was almost lost. "In the bad place. I am glad you did not leave me. I would never leave you." Tanith squeezed his fingers. "Never." Below, Corisanda and Theron finally broke apart. They looked up at the window, saw the children watching, and something silent passed between all 4 of them. A recognition, a promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The night after Aldous left was the longest of Corisanda's life. She could not sleep. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow seemed to hold threat. She checked on the children a dozen times, watching them breathe, reassuring herself they were still there, still safe. Theron did not even pretend to sleep. He sat by the cottage door with a borrowed hunting rifle across his knees, watching the lane, waiting for an attack that never came. Near dawn, Corisanda joined him. "You should rest," he said without looking up. "So should you. I will rest when Aldous is in chains." She sat beside him on the cold floor, close enough that their shoulders touched. The contact steadied her. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "After the magistrate? I take Emmerich home, rebuild his life, try to undo whatever damage Aldous has done to the estate, to the staff, to everything I thought I could trust. And the children? Tanith is not your blood. She has no claim on your protection." Theron turned to look at her. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, but warm with something deeper. "Tanith saved my nephew's life. She protected him when no one else could. As far as I am concerned, she has more claim on my protection than most of my actual relatives. She is a street child, an orphan. Society will not accept her. Society can go hang." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I spent my entire life trying to please society, trying to be what my father demanded, what the title required. And where did it get me? A cousin who tried to murder my nephew, a household full of spies, an empty life with nothing but duty and obligation. And now? Now I want something different." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I want a life that matters. I want children who laugh. I want a woman who tells me I am trespassing on her property and means it. I want you, Corisande." The air left her lungs. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and stubborn and impossibly kind. I know you took in 2 terrified children without hesitation. I know you faced down a murderer to protect people who were not even your blood. I know that when I am with you, I feel like myself for the first time in 32 years. Her vision blurred with unshed tears. "This is madness." "Yes." He cupped her face with his free hand. "Complete madness. And I do not care." He kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper, more urgent. She melted into him, her fears dissolving in the heat of his touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Come with me," he whispered, "when this is over. Come to Ashworth. You and Tanith and Emmerich. Let me give you a life. Let me give us a chance." "As what?" Her voice shook. "Your mistress? Your convenient country widow tucked away where no one can see? As my wife." The word hung in the air between them. "You cannot mean that," she breathed. "I have never meant anything more." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes fierce with conviction. "I know it is too soon. I know we have known each other barely a fortnight. I know society will be scandalized, my family will be furious, and everyone will say I have lost my mind. I do not care. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you will have me." She stared at him. This impossible, infuriating, wonderful man who had arrived at her door, demanding answers, and somehow become everything she never knew she wanted. "Yes," she said. The word came out barely louder than a breath. "Yes, I will have you." His face transformed. The severity melted away, replaced by a joy so raw and unguarded that it stole her breath. He kissed her again, and somewhere in the cold gray light of dawn, with danger still lurking and the future still uncertain, they found something that felt like hope. They made it official that morning. Theron sent word to the local vicar, requesting a meeting. He sent word to the magistrate about Aldous. He sent word to his solicitor in London, instructing him to begin drawing up documents that would make Tanith his legal ward. And then, in the small parish church, with only the children as witnesses, he married Corisande Ashby. The vicar was bewildered, but compliant. A duke's wishes were not to be questioned. even when they involved marrying a country widow with no family, no connections, and no dowry whatsoever. Corisanda wore her best dress, a simple blue muslin that had seen better days. Theron wore the same practical clothes he had been wearing all week. They spoke their vows in low, serious voices, with the weight of everything they had survived pressing down on them. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Emmerich cheered. Tanith smiled, a real smile, the first Corisanda had ever seen from her. It was not the wedding Corisanda had imagined as a girl. It was better. It was real. Afterwards, they walked back to the cottage as a family. Theron carried Emmerich on his shoulders. Tanith held Corisanda's hand. The spring sun was finally breaking through the clouds, and for a moment, everything felt possible. The moment didn't last. A rider appeared on the lane, galloping hard. Theron set Emmerich down immediately, positioning himself in front of the others. But the rider was not a threat. It was a young man in livery, clearly exhausted, clearly terrified. "Your Grace." He dismounted clumsily, nearly falling. "I have been searching for you everywhere. There is news from London." "What news?" The man swallowed hard. "Lord Aldous. He has gone to the House of Lords. He is claiming that you have gone mad, that you kidnapped your nephew and are holding him hostage, that you have fallen under the influence of a scheming widow who has bewitched you into marriage for your fortune." Theron went very still. "When did this happen?" "Yesterday, Your Grace. He presented documents, witnesses. He's calling for you to be declared incompetent. He wants to be named guardian of the boy and regent of your estates." The world seemed to tilt beneath Corisande's feet. She reached for the fence post, steadying herself. "He is lying," she said. "Everything he is saying is a lie." "I know, Your Grace." The young man looked between them helplessly. "But he has powerful friends, people who owe him money, people who want favors. They are supporting his claims. If you do not return to London immediately to defend yourself, you could lose everything." Theron's face had become a mask again. His eyes had gone cold, all the warmth of the morning vanishing. "Prepare my horse," he said flatly. "Theron." Corisande touched his arm. "We should discuss this. There is nothing to discuss." He did not look at her. "I have to go. Now. Before Aldous consolidates his position any further. Then we will come with you." "No." The word was sharp. "Absolute. London is not safe. Aldous clearly has resources I did not anticipate. I will not bring you or the children into that viper's nest until I know what we are facing." "So you are just going to leave us here?" "I am going to protect you." He finally met her eyes, and she saw the anguish beneath the ice. "I just married you, Corisande. I will not let Aldous destroy that. I will not let him hurt you or the children. But I cannot fight him from here. I have to go back. I have to face this." She wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. But she saw the truth in his face. He was right. Aldous had made this a battle that could only be fought in London, in the halls of power, with weapons Corisanda did not possess. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "I do not know. Days. Weeks. However long it takes to prove he is lying. And if you cannot prove it," his face hardened, "then I will find another way." He kissed her, hard, desperate, tasting of goodbye. She memorized the feel of him, the taste of him, because some part of her knew this might be the last time. "I will send word as soon as I can," he said against her lips. "Do not trust anyone. Do not leave the cottage. And if Aldous sends men, take the children and run. Go to Mrs. Pemberton in Thornwick, just as I told you. She will protect you." "Theron, I love you." The words came out rough, broken, I know I have not said it before. I know this is the worst possible moment. But I love you, Coruscant. Whatever happens, remember that." Then he was gone, mounting his horse, galloping down the lane, disappearing into the distance without looking back. Coruscant stood in the garden, watching until she could no longer see him, feeling something vital crack in her chest. The sun that had felt so warm moments ago now seemed pale and distant. The cottage that had been her sanctuary now felt like a cage. Behind her, Emmerich started to cry. She gathered him in her arms, murmuring comfort she did not feel, and wondered how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The days that followed were agony. Coruscant went through the motions of living. She cooked meals, taught lessons, tended the garden. She smiled for the children, reassured them that everything would be fine, and promised that Theron would return soon. But at night, alone in the bed that still smelled faintly of him, she let herself fall apart. She pressed her face into his pillow and wept until she had nothing left. She replayed every moment they had shared, wondering if she had imagined the tenderness in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice. No word came. Not the first day. Not the second. Not the third. By the fourth day, she had stopped expecting letters. By the fifth, she was beginning to fear the worst. She imagined him imprisoned, discredited, stripped of everything while Aldous smiled and lied and won. She imagined never seeing him again, never hearing his voice, never feeling his arms around her. The uncertainty was worse than grief. At least grief had certainty. This was limbo, endless and suffocating. On the sixth day, a letter arrived. It was not from Theron. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the seal plain wax with no insignia. She opened it with trembling hands. "Mrs. Vantress," the letter began, and even seeing her new name written felt strange and painful. "You do not know me, but I know you. I am a friend of your husband, or I was until recently. I am writing to warn you that things in London are worse than you know. Aldous has produced witnesses who claim to have seen the Duke behaving erratically. He has hired physicians to testify that the Duke is suffering from a disorder of the mind. The House of Lords is taking his claims seriously. Your husband is fighting, but he is losing, and he is too proud to tell you. There is something else you should know. Aldous has learned where you are. He is sending men. Not to kill you. That would be too obvious now that the whole country is watching. But to take you into custody. To prove that you are the scheming fortune hunter he claims you are. To use you as evidence against your husband. You need to run. Tonight. Take the children to Thornwick as your husband instructed, and pray that someone in London finds the courage to tell the truth before it is too late. A friend." Coruscant read the letter 3 times. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. He was losing. Theron was losing, and he had not told her, had not wanted her to worry, and had tried to protect her even as his world collapsed. And Aldous was coming for her. She found Tanith in the kitchen, helping Emmerich with his letters. "Pack a bag," she said, keeping her voice calm despite the panic clawing at her chest. "Only what you can carry. We leave in an hour." Tanith's eyes widened, but she did not argue. She had survived too much to question danger when she saw it. "Where are we going?" "Thornwick. There is someone there who can help us." And then, Coruscant squared her shoulders. "Then we go to London, we find Theron, and we fight." The journey to Thornwick took 2 days. They traveled on foot, avoiding the main roads, sleeping in barns and hedgerows. Coruscant carried Emmerich when he grew too tired to walk. Tanith scouted ahead, her street instincts proving invaluable. The first night, they sheltered in an abandoned shepherd's hut, huddled together for warmth. Rain dripped through holes in the roof, and the wind howled through gaps in the walls. Emmerich whimpered in his sleep, and Corisanda held him close, humming softly, pretending she was not terrified. The second day brought more rain, cold and relentless. They trudged through mud that sucked at their shoes, through forests that dripped and whispered, through a world that seemed determined to stop them. Twice, they saw riders in the distance, men in dark clothes, searching. The first time, Corisande pulled the children behind a crumbling stone wall and held her breath until the hoofbeats faded. The second time, they had to hide in a ditch filled with icy water, pressing themselves into the mud, listening as the horses passed within feet of their hiding spot. By the time they crawled out, Emmerich was shaking so hard Corisande feared he might shatter. She stripped off her own cloak and wrapped it around him, ignoring the cold that bit into her skin. Not much further, she promised, just a little more. By the time they reached Thornwick, Corisande was exhausted beyond measure. Her feet were blistered and bleeding. Her clothes were ruined. Her spirit was hanging by a thread. But Mrs. Pemberton was exactly what Theron had promised. A stout, practical woman in her 50s. She took one look at them and ushered them inside without a single question. "The Duke sent word you might come," she said, leading them to a small but clean room at the back of her cottage. "He said to keep you safe at any cost. Is there news from London?" Mrs. Pemberton's face darkened. "Nothing good. The vote is in 3 days. If the Lords rule against him, Aldous becomes regent. The Duke loses everything. There must be something we can do. You could testify." Mrs. Pemberton looked at her shrewdly. "You were there when Aldous confessed. You heard everything. Your word could change the outcome. They would never let me speak. I am nobody. A widow from the country. You are the Duchess of Ashworth." Mrs. Pemberton smiled grimly. "That is not nobody. And there are lords who are not yet convinced by Aldous' lies. Lords who might be swayed by a woman brave enough to stand before them and tell the truth." Corisande thought of Theron, of his face when he said "I love you," of the life they had barely begun, the family they were trying to build. She thought of Emmerich, who still woke screaming from nightmares, of Tanith, who had been willing to die to protect a boy she barely knew. She thought of Aldous, smiling as he talked about accidents happening to little boys. "How do I get to London?" she asked. Mrs. Pemberton's smile widened. "I thought you might ask that." London was overwhelming. Corisanda had heard stories about the city, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. The noise hit her first, a cacophony of voices and wheels and hooves that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then the smell, cold smoke and horse dung and roasting meat, and something underneath that was uniquely, unmistakably human. The crowds were endless. People pressed together on streets so narrow that carriages could barely pass. Hawkers shouted their wares. Children darted between legs, quick and feral. Ladies in silk walked beside beggars in rags, and no one seemed to notice anyone else. Corisanda clung to Mrs. Pemberton's arm as they navigated the chaos, Tanith holding tight to her other hand, Emmerich riding on the back of a hired porter because his legs had given out an hour ago. They reached the House of Lords just as the session was beginning. The building loomed above them, all stone and columns and centuries of power. Corisanda had never felt so small. "You cannot go in there," the guard at the door said flatly. "Women are not permitted. I am the Duchess of Ashworth." Corisanda drew herself up to her full height, which was not particularly impressive, but she made up for it with sheer force of will. "I am here to testify on behalf of my husband. You can let me in, or you can explain to every lord in that chamber why you prevented crucial evidence from being heard." The guard hesitated. Behind him, she could hear voices raised in debate. Someone was speaking about mental incompetence, about the safety of minor children, about the future of a great estate. I have written testimony. She pulled the letter from her pocket, the one Mrs. Pemberton had helped her compose the night before. And I have a witness, a child who was present when Lord Aldous confessed to arranging the kidnapping of his own cousin's son. The guard's eyes widened. He looked at Tanith, who stared back with the fierce defiance of a girl who had survived things no child should survive. "Wait here," he said finally. He disappeared inside. Minutes passed. Corisanda's pulse pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She gripped Tanith's hand tighter. "Are you ready for this?" she asked the girl. Tanith nodded. "I've been waiting to tell someone the truth for months. I am ready." The doors opened. A man emerged, older, dignified, with the bearing of someone accustomed to power. He looked at Corisanda with sharp, assessing eyes. "You are the Duchess of Ashworth?" "I am. And you have evidence regarding Lord Aldous's claims?" "I have the truth. Whether your lordships choose to hear it is another matter." Something flickered across his stern features. Respect, perhaps. Or at least interest. "Follow me," he said. The chamber was enormous. Hundreds of men in robes and wigs, seated in tiered rows, all turning to stare as Corisande entered. She had never felt so small, so insignificant, so absolutely terrified. Then she saw Theron. He was standing at the front of the chamber, flanked by men who were clearly meant to be restraining him. His face was pale, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. But when he saw her, when their eyes met across that vast room, something ignited in his expression. Hope. "My lords," Corisande said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I am Corisande Vantress, Duchess of Ashworth. I am here to tell you that everything Lord Aldous has claimed is a lie." The chamber erupted. Men shouted, demanded order, and demanded she be removed. Aldous leaped to his feet, his face contorted with fury. "This woman is a fraud," he shouted. "A fortune hunter who has manipulated my cousin into madness." "I am his wife," Corisanda shot back. "Married legally, before witnesses, by a vicar who will testify to the validity of the union. And I was present when you, Lord Aldous, entered my home and confessed to arranging the kidnapping of your own nephew." The chamber went silent. "I heard you speak of accidents happening to little boys." Corisande's voice rang out clear and strong. "I heard you offer my husband a choice. Give up the child quietly, let you kill him painlessly, and avoid scandal. Or fight you, and watch everyone he loved be destroyed." "Lies," Aldous snarled. "She is lying. Then explain this." Corisande turned to the doorway, where Tanith stood with Mrs. Pemberton. "My lords, this is Tanith. She is 9 years old. She was present during the entirety of Emmeric's captivity. She can describe the men who held him, the places they were kept, and the man who visited them. A man with a gold ring bearing a snake design. A man she heard discussing the inheritance that would pass to him once the boy was dead." Tanith stepped forward. Her face was pale but set with determination. "There were 4 men who guarded us," she said, her voice cutting through the murmuring crowd. "They kept us in a cellar beneath a mill outside of Harrogate. We were there for 3 months. They fed us once a day and never let us see sunlight." The chamber had gone completely silent now. Every lord was watching the small girl with something between horror and fascination. "The man with the snake ring came twice," Tanith continued. "The first time, he looked at Emmerich and said, 'The boy looks healthy enough to travel. Make sure that changes before you finish this.' The second time, he brought money. A leather purse full of gold coins. He counted them out in front of me like I was not even there, like I was nothing." She pointed directly at Aldous. It was him. "I will never forget his face. He told the other men to make it look like an accident. He said, When the boy was gone, everything would belong to him. And then he laughed. Aldous lunged forward. Guards restrained him. "She is a child," he shouted. "A street orphan. Her word means nothing." "Her word means everything," Theron said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Because it is the truth, and because she is not the only witness." He reached into his coat and pulled out a sheaf of papers. "While you were busy bribing lords and producing false witnesses, cousin, I was busy finding the men you hired, the ones who actually took Emmerich. They were surprisingly willing to talk once they realized you had abandoned them to save yourself. I have signed confessions, names, dates, amounts paid. Everything leads back to you." The chamber erupted again, but this time the tide had turned. Corisande could see it in the faces around her. Doubt where there had been certainty. Anger where there had been sympathy for Aldous. "This is a conspiracy," Aldous shouted. "They have conspired against me. The only conspiracy here is yours." Theron's voice cut through the noise. "You tried to murder a child, my brother's child. And when that failed, you tried to destroy me. You tried to take everything I have. My title, my home, my family." He moved toward Aldous, and the guards let him. "But you made one mistake, cousin. You underestimated the people I love. You underestimated my wife. You underestimated a 9-year-old girl who was braver than you will ever be. And you underestimated me." He stopped directly in front of Aldous. The two men stared at each other. "It is over," Theron said, his voice low and final. "You have lost." Aldous' face crumpled. The mask of confidence shattered, revealing the desperate, pathetic man beneath. "Guards," someone called. "Take Lord Aldous into custody." They dragged him away. He went screaming, protesting, making wild accusations that no one believed anymore. Corisande sagged with relief. Theron crossed the chamber in 3 strides and caught her in his arms. "You came," he breathed against her hair. "I told you to stay safe. I told you to hide. I was never very good at following orders." She pulled back to look at his face. "You were losing." "I was. Until you walked through that door." He cupped her face in his hands. "How did you know to come?" "A letter. Anonymous. Someone who said they were your friend." His brow furrowed. "Pemberton. It must have been. I asked her to watch over you, but I never expected. You never expected me to fight back? I never expected to deserve someone who would." She kissed him. Right there, in front of the entire House of Lords, in front of everyone who had doubted him, everyone who had believed Aldous' lies. Let them stare. Let them gossip. She did not care. She had her husband, she had her family, and she was never letting go. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Aldous was tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang. He escaped the noose only through the intervention of distant relatives, who arranged for transportation to the colonies instead. Corisande did not care where he went, as long as he could never hurt them again. The House of Lords formally apologized to Theron. His title, his estates, his reputation were all restored. The false witnesses recanted. The bribed lords suddenly discovered pressing business elsewhere, and Corisande, the country widow who had dared to challenge a duke, became the most talked about woman in London. She hated it. Hated the stares, the whispers, the endless invitations from people who had been perfectly willing to believe her, a scheming fortune hunter just weeks before. But she endured it. For Theron, for the children, for the life they were building together. The formal wedding was Theron's idea. "We are already married," she protested, legally, officially. "Why do we need another ceremony?" Because the first one was rushed and secret, and attended only by 2 children in a country church. He took her hands in both of his. "You deserve better. You deserve flowers and music and a dress that costs more than your entire cottage. You deserve to walk down an aisle with everyone watching, knowing that I chose you, that I will always choose you. I do not need those things." "I know," he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "But I want to give them to you anyway. Please, let me." She could not refuse him, could not refuse anything when he looked at her like that. The wedding was held at Ashworth Cathedral, the same church where generations of Vantris dukes had been married. Coruscant wore ivory silk and a veil of antique lace that had belonged to Theron's mother. Tanith served as her attendant, scrubbed and polished, and wearing the first new dress she had ever owned. Emmerich carried the rings on a velvet cushion, his face solemn with the importance of his task. The cathedral was packed. Lords and ladies, merchants and farmers, everyone who had heard the story of the Duke and the widow and wanted to see the happy ending for themselves. But Coruscant saw none of them. She saw only Theron, standing at the altar, watching her approach with an expression that made her heart stop. "You are beautiful," he said when she reached him. "You are biased, hopelessly." He took her hands, forever. They spoke their vows again, the same words, but different somehow, heavier, more real. They had been through fire together, and they had survived. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife for the second time, a cheer went up that shook the rafters. The sound echoed off the ancient stone walls, filling the cathedral with joy. Theron kissed her thoroughly, scandalously, until the cheering turned to laughter. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I know," she smiled. "You mentioned it once or twice." "Only once or twice?" "I shall have to do better." He kissed her again. The reception was held in the great hall of Ashworth Manor. Hundreds of candles blazed in crystal chandeliers. Musicians played. Guests danced and laughed and toasted the happy couple. But the moment Coruscant would remember most came near the end of the evening, when she found Tanith and Emmerich sitting together on a window seat, watching the adults with expressions of wonder. "Is this real?" Emmerich asked when she sat beside them. "Is this really our home now?" "Yes, sweetheart. This is really your home. Forever?" "Forever." He leaned against her, small body warm and trusting. Tanith took her hand and squeezed. "Thank you," the girl said. Her voice was thick with emotion she was trying to hide. "For everything." Coruscant pulled them both close. "Thank you for finding me that night. Thank you for being brave enough to knock on a stranger's door." "We did not have anywhere else to go," Tanith admitted. "Sometimes," Coruscant said, "the places we end up by accident are exactly where we were meant to be." 2 years later, Coruscant stood in the garden of Ashworth Manor, watching her family. Emmerich was 7 now, healthy and happy, chasing one of the enormous, foolish dogs across the lawn. The nightmares had faded. The fear had healed. He laughed easily, loved freely, and called Coruscant Mama without hesitation. Tanith was 11, fierce as ever, but softening around the edges. She had learned to read, to write, to ride horses and argue philosophy, and beat Theron soundly at chess. She was going to be extraordinary. She already was. And in Coruscant's arms, wrapped in a blanket of softest wool, their daughter slept. Seraphine, named for no one, belonging only to themselves. 3 months old, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Wool gathering again. Theron's voice came from behind her, warm with amusement. She turned, smiling, remembering. "I was thinking about the day you arrived at my cottage, how furious I was, how certain I was that you were the enemy. And now I cannot imagine my life without you." She leaned into him as his arms came around her, and the baby both. You changed everything. You changed me." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I was so cold before you. So empty. I thought duty and honor were enough. I thought feeling nothing was the same as being strong. And now? Now I know that loving someone is the bravest thing a person can do." He looked out at the garden, at their children, at the life they had built. "You taught me that. You and Emmerich and Tanith. We taught each other." They stood there in the fading light, watching Emmerich tumble in the grass, watching Tanith pretend not to smile at his antics, watching the dogs bark their foolish joy. "Do you ever regret it?" Theron asked, his voice soft against her hair. "Leaving your cottage, giving up your independence, marrying a man who came with so much trouble attached?" "Never." She looked up at him, not for a single moment. That cottage was shelter. "This is home." He kissed her softly, reverently, as if she were something precious beyond measure. "I love you, Coruscant of Antris. I love you too, Theron." "Always." From the lawn, Emmerich called out, laughing, "Mama, Papa, come play." They went. Together. A family forged, not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by the simple, stubborn refusal to let fear win. Seraphine stirred in Coruscanda's arms, making a small sound of contentment. Theron reached down to touch the baby's cheek with one finger, his expression so full of wonder that it made Coruscanda's heart ache. "She is perfect," he said. "They all are. This life we have built. I never imagined I could have this. Neither did I. But here we are. Here we are." Some storms, it turned out, brought unexpected gifts. Some dangers led to unexpected love, and some choices, the hard ones, the terrifying ones, the ones that required risking everything, those were the choices that led to happily ever after. Thank you for staying with Coruscanda and Theron until the very end. Their story began with 2 lost children on a rainy night and a woman brave enough to shelter them. It continued with a duke who learned that love is stronger than duty, that family is more than blood, and that the right person can change everything. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another tale. There are more stories waiting, more impossible loves, more hard-won choices, more moments that remind us why we believe in happy endings. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist.